When two vehicles collide in a busy intersection, the physical wreckage is obvious. But in a courtroom, assigning legal blame is a much messier process. To win a standard negligence lawsuit, a plaintiff must prove 5 distinct elements: duty, breach, actual cause, proximate cause, and damages. The first hurdle, duty, requires showing the defendant owed a legal obligation, traditionally measured by the reasonably prudent person standard. If the defendant's actions fell below what a reasonably careful individual would do, they have breached their duty of care. The weakness of this common law standard is its reliance on subjective judgment. Juries are forced to debate the abstract concept of a reasonable person, opening the door to unpredictable verdicts. This legal text outlines an evidentiary doctrine designed to eliminate that uncertainty: negligence per se. It is not a standalone cause of action, but a mechanical doctrine used to establish the first 2 elements of a broader tort claim. When a defendant violates a specific criminal, health, or safety law, a judge can use that statute to definitively dictate what a reasonable person should have done, removing jury debate. By proving the statutory violation, the law essentially short-circuits the first 2 steps of the negligence framework. The separate elements of duty and breach are consolidated into a single established fact. The jury is no longer asked to weigh whether the defendant acted carefully. Their job is reduced to a binary question: did the defendant break the law? If yes, the plaintiff establishes a significant evidentiary advantage, effectively removing the defendant's ability to argue they were acting prudently despite their violation. Judges do not automatically convert every broken municipal code or administrative rule into civil tort liability. A paperwork violation won't dictate the outcome of a car crash. To invoke this framework, the plaintiff must prove that the specific facts of their case strictly align with the original legislative intent behind the statute. First, the plaintiff must show they belong to the specific class of persons the legislature intended to protect when they wrote the law. Second, the injury suffered must be the exact type of harm the statute was designed to prevent. Both of these prongs rest on a foundational requirement. The statute itself must dictate a clear standard of conduct, rather than a vague directive to simply act safely. If either the victim or the injury fails the test, the court will refuse to adopt the statute as the standard of care. The plaintiff is then forced back to the subjective, reasonably prudent person standard. Consider the facts of Oakland v. Bingham County. 2 children bypassed an unlocked gate, entered a county landfill, and were killed when a pit wall collapsed on them. Under traditional common law, landowners owe a very low duty of care to trespassers. That standard alone would typically defeat the family's negligence claim at the outset. However, state safety regulations legally required the county to block access to the landfill to protect the public from hazardous conditions. Applying the 2-part test, the court found that the children were part of the protected class of the public, and the fatal collapse was exactly the harm the fencing regulations sought to prevent. This demonstrates the supplantation principle. When the statutory test is satisfied, the new duty completely erases traditional common law status rules. The county's conduct was judged solely against the regulation, rendering the children's status as trespassers legally irrelevant. But if a judge adopts the statute and the defendant clearly broke it, is liability absolute? This image of a vintage stop sign illustrates a fixed traffic directive, much like the one at the center of Totsky v. Rightway bus service. In that case, a bus driver failed to stop at a required intersection and collided with another vehicle. The violation of the stop sign was undeniable, but the driver had encountered a completely unobservable patch of black ice, leaving him with only seconds to react before skidding through the intersection. The court did not impose strict liability. Instead, they recognized an excused violation. Under the emergency doctrine, a sudden crisis that is not created by the defendant legally excuses a statutory breach because compliance with the law was physically impossible. While negligence per se establishes duty and breach, it is a rebuttable presumption. It can be defeated if the defendant proves a recognized common law excuse, like a sudden emergency. The most common trap in litigation is assuming that establishing negligence per se guarantees a victory for the plaintiff. Proving the defendant broke the law only satisfies the first 2 steps of the claim. The last 3 elements remain completely unresolved. The plaintiff must still independently satisfy the but-for test, proving that the specific statutory violation is the actual, factual cause of the accident. They must also prove proximate cause, demonstrating that the resulting harm was a reasonably foreseeable consequence of that specific breach. Negligence per se effectively addresses the first half of the case, but the plaintiff still carries the full burden of linking that broken law directly to their tangible damages. Finally, the application of this doctrine varies significantly by state, depending on how local courts interpret legislative intent. We can see this split between jurisdictions like Wisconsin and North Carolina. Wisconsin implies civil liability from safety statutes, supplanting the standard. North Carolina prohibits traffic violations from automatically supplanting the standard, treating the broken law merely as evidence. To analyze these cases, focus on the core elements, identify the protected class, match the type of harm, determine legislative intent, apply the supplantation principle, and test for an excused violation. Mastering this doctrine requires executing a precise two-part test to secure this evidentiary advantage, while simultaneously anticipating the state-specific rules and emergency defenses that can quickly dismantle it.